Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today we're going to hear some great stories from Brittany Kichton. Brittany is former Miss North Carolina. She's currently out of Alberta, Canada, and she has a bunch of great predator stories for us today. So I'm not going to steal any of your thunder. I just want to say thank you, Brittany, very much for coming on the podcast and for trailblazing, being the first female to jump on. And I know that we're going to have a bunch more coming up here in the future. But that being said, let's go ahead and kick this thing off and let's let Brittany tell you her stories. All right, Brittany, welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. I've told you several times already. I've asked a lot of female hunters to jump on. I don't know. I imagine I'm probably getting stuck in Instagram limbo. They probably have all their messages blocked because of the millions of creepy guys out there probably sending messages. But you replied to me, and so thank you so much. I can't wait to hear the stories that you have. I've been following you for a while. So that being said, I know who you are, but why don't you maybe introduce yourself to the listeners so they know who we're talking to?
No problem. So I am Brittany Kichton. I'm originally from the Carolinas in the States. I grew up in North Carolina and Wilmington, lived in Raleigh for a bit, and then moved to Charleston, South Carolina. And then I had the fortune of meeting a Canadian in Alberta on a hunting trip, actually.
There you go.
I'm falling in love, and now I'm in Canada. But so I still do a lot of hunting stuff in the States. I go to Montana quite a bit to hunt elk, Idaho. I used to have a whitetail lease in Illinois that I absolutely loved. Doing that, like that's got my heart. And then I also film for the Drury family, their TV show called Critical Mass, which is on Sportsman's Outdoor Channel. So I do a lot with that and their Deercast app and whatnot. And yeah, if I can hunt and have the time, especially now that we have a newborn, I'm out there.
That's the trick, right? You are definitely a much more experienced hunter than I am. I've only been doing it for a few years. The problem that I've had is I started hunting basically when I started having kids, and it's hard to fit it in. So I wish you the best of luck. You got the young one. I think I occasionally hear her in the background.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's tough. But I'm sure you guys, if you make it part of your life, you make it happen. So I'm sure you'll still be out there making more hunting stories.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I got started hunting actually in 2011. So I've always been really outdoorsy. I always liked competing with the guys when I was growing up. But in 2011, I won the title of Miss North Carolina USA as my first pageant, which was fun. Like it was a girly thing to do. Pretty cool.
Your first pageant? Wow.
Yeah. When I come to play, Michael. I like to be competitive in what I do.
Yeah.
It's just the right night, right judges, I guess, and it worked out and really was a huge blessing in my life and got to do a lot of cool things and meet cool people from senators to congressmen to different job opportunities. But yeah, through that, Matt Busbis of Wild Game Nation invited me and Miss Louisiana at the time on a hunting trip in Texas. I was like, heck yeah, that's right up my alley. So I flew to Texas, shot my first buck ever and got a doe and just had a blast and realized I absolutely loved it. I was on fire for it.
Gotcha. So you had never done any hunting, like no duck, no geese,
nothing,
no dove?
Nothing. Nope. Like I said,
That's so
super
cool.
Outdoorsy and really competitive. Like I have 2 biology degrees, so being connected with nature and animals is really important to me and something I love, but hadn't actually hunted. So then when I got back to Carolina, I did everything I could to teach myself, asked other people for help and advice and guiding, and through that got into rifle hunting and then eventually into archery hunting, and that's where my passion really lies.
That's awesome. That's such a cool, you would never expect someone saying, I won a pageant, and it started my passion for hunting.
Yeah, no, typically that's a bit frowned upon sometimes in that industry. Because
I could see that.
I
could see that. Yeah. Either way, well, that's awesome. It's cool that it's cool that that's the turn that life gave you. And I'm gonna sign up for one pageant. I'm gonna win that shit, and then I'm gonna become a hunter and
we go.
Yeah. Yep. Make that my personality moving forward. That's cool.
Exactly.
Well, that's awesome. Well, the point of being here, right? We're telling hunting stories today. So I don't know if you have any particular ones you want to tell. If you want me to take some requests, I can throw a dart close my eyes and throw a dart at the board. But I don't know your hunting life. So if you have one that we maybe kick us off with, maybe set the stage, kind
Yeah,
of
no worries.
where you
Like,
were, and who you were with and what you were hunting for.
no problem. I love spot and stalk hunting. Like deer stand hunting for whitetail is very traditional. I like that too. But when it comes to elk or wolf hunting or moose hunting, stuff like that, like I like to run and gun and be on the ground and be mobile. So my favorite hunting stories kind of revolve around those scenarios. And I have a few different categories. Like all-time favorite hunt would be the one that I came up to Alberta and met my husband on, or I guess we had met earlier, but really got to know each other. And I didn't even get an elk that trip, but
Yeah,
just had
but you
so
came
much
home with the
fun.
trophy. You came
I
home with the
really
trophy.
didn't expect it then. We just kept talking afterwards. But I just remember, him and I both had kind of rotten relationships previously, and neither of us planned on being with anybody for a long time. And coming out, I learned so much on that trip about calling and tracking animals. And elk are pretty cool. Like if you are familiar with turkey hunting, the calling idea is kind of similar. But on a much grander scale. And then you're playing wind and thermals and everything else. So I learned a lot about that. I learned a lot about, reading the elk and kind of knowing which calls to do when on that trip. And yeah, I laughed so hard that I had better abs by the end of the trip than I ever had.
Of course.
So that one
Were
is,
you like how experienced were you in hunting when you went on that trip? I know 2011 you kicked it off, but how quickly from 2011 and that whitetail to this elk trip?
quite a bit. I mean, prior to coming up to Alberta, I used to do a lot of backcountry elk hunts in Montana.
Okay.
And I've had days where I was solo hunting in the backcountry of Montana, which I wouldn't do now. It's a little older, a little wiser, realize like there are things such as grizzlies or bad weather coming and socking you in. It's good to have a buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good
in
to have a
my
buddy.
in my younger, dumber days where I'm like, I can do anything. A
Yeah.
little bit of that. But yeah,
What's
so
funny is even when you're not young, you're still always a little bit dumb. My elk
yeah.
hunting trip this year, it's a good thing I had a buddy. I haven't told this story on the podcast, but I'll just chime in real quick because it actually ruined my season.
Mm,
Opening day, we go in, we have a productive-ish day. We see some mule deer, and I have a mule deer tag and an elk tag. Mule deer and elk. I call in an elk. I wasn't paying attention to thermals. Oops. It ran off. But we're walking home end of the day, and I slipped down some scree, and I
yeah.
land on my back, and I compressed a disc in my back,
Yeah. And it's
and
crazy how fast
yeah,
something can go bad, right? And you just
yeah,
never know. You can be totally prepared, weather can be perfect, and it can change on a dime, something completely unexpected. And it's just not worth
absolutely.
the risk.
Yeah, and what's funny is I didn't even take a big spill. I just sort of felt a little funny because I was lifting my bow to make sure that I didn't, mess up the cams on any rocks. And I was actually really proud of the fall. I was like, minor fall, didn't hurt my bow. Let's get back to hunting. So we hike a couple more miles. End of the day, we get home, and the next day, about half of the day, shooting pain down my
Yeah.
leg, and I've had that pain. Like I have that pain today. I'm here. It's 5 weeks later. I left the woods. I think I hiked around one more day because I could actually felt good on my feet,
Yeah.
but that was probably a mistake. Either way,
I'm
I
glad
had an
you're okay
epidural.
because that can be scary.
Well, I'm okay as a whole, but I had an epidural yesterday, so they injected a bunch of steroids into my spine, and so hopefully, my doctor says I can get up. I have a rifle tag in November, and I'm hoping that I can get out there for it. So right
Oh,
now, I
yeah.
don't feel quite up for it, but hopefully soon. But like you said, having a buddy is important because he helped me get out of there because it was bad. I couldn't
No,
even sit in my car. It took me a long time to get home.
yeah, for sure. And especially
So
when you're out in the middle of nowhere, no cell phone service or anything, like having somebody there in the event that something does go bad is crucial. So that I highly recommend. But no, I used to do lots and lots of hunting. Definitely started off offshore fishing mostly and then transitioned into the hunting industry and just fell in love with it.
yeah,
So
that's amazing. So the trip where you met your husband, did you have a bunch of? I know you didn't harvest anything. You eventually got a ring out of it, but did you like? did you have any close encounters on that trip? Anything else
did.
beyond the hubby that made it like stand out as an experience?
Oh yeah. And it's funny because he's like 6'5". So what he can see is totally different than what I can see because I'm only 5'6". So we were calling and had this gorgeous 5x5 elk coming in. And so like for me, this is going to be my very first elk ever. He is screaming his head off as he's coming in, like just flying, like runs right into range, except where he hung up, it would have been a 20-yard chip shot, but I had brush right in the way of where his vitals would have been from my angle. Meanwhile, Richard's like, shoot, shoot, what's wrong? Why aren't you shooting? I'm like, because all I can see is a big bush in front of my face and his lungs. So yeah, it was funny, but no, wasn't quite able to hit the release on that one. It was pretty cool experience. And to like see them come running in like that and bugling from that close, it's something to see, but actually to feel. Like you can
Yeah.
feel that bugle in the air ripping through your body and like feeling the ground shaking as him and his cows are coming in and everything too. Like it is just something to behold. And once you experience that, like you will never quit.
Yeah. Yeah. I've not been that close for elk bugling. I've been like across a valley and I was like,
Yeah.
holy shit.
Oh
Like
man,
this is
we
cool.
literally have video of Richard's broadhead in the corner of the screen with the elk right there. Like he could have reached his bow out and poked it. It was
Yeah.
insane.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah, the one elk I did call in this year came in completely silent. I just heard breaking sticks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm still waiting for that 20-yard screaming bull
Uh-huh.
experience. And
It's
I
fun.
know I'm worried about my wife wanting to stay with me after I have that experience because like I'm already
You'll be
pretty
gone all
into
the time.
hunting, and I'm just like, yeah, when that happens, sorry, honey, we got to
You
figure
just
something
have
else
to
out for
get her into
September.
it too and have a really good babysitter.
Ooh, well, we've got good babysitters, but she has a intrinsic problem with death. She loves that
That's
I'm a
okay.
hunter because
That is
I could be a guy that's going to the bars every night and playing video games every other day.
very true.
So she loves that I'm a hunter, but she has no interest. She understands death, that food comes with death,
Yep.
but she has no interest in seeing it. So
That's okay.
I think
That's
that's a
fair
battle I don't think I can win.
well, it's good to know which battles to pick and choose, right? So
Absolutely,
that's fair.
absolutely.
But yeah, so that was just like a life-changing hunt for me in a lot of ways, but just to even just strictly the hunting aspect, I learned so much about calling then. Like I bought my very first mouth reeds then and learned more about the subtleties of different cow calls on that trip versus, I've seen so many people go out and they rip out the bugle and they're like, oh, this doesn't work. The elk are always running away from me. I'm like, well, what do you expect? Like they think there's a competing bull in the area and why would they
Yeah,
fight you when they can just take their cows and go?
absolutely.
So yeah, I learned a
Yeah,
lot about being more strategic and having more success with the kind of calling you do.
yeah, absolutely. I'm still learning those lessons, but I'll get there,
Me too.
right?
It's hard.
So I was actually so the last person I interviewed was Michael Batiste, and he's a former elk calling champion. He's the Elk Calling Academy, if you're familiar with him at
Yep.
all.
Oh yeah. We
But
listen to that quite a bit.
he was saying that exact same stuff. He's like he's always learning. There's
Yep.
you'll never get a perfect circumstance. It'll always be something that makes you think, okay, what did I do wrong there? Or
Yeah.
you get lucky. That's all the way
One
I
of
see
the
it.
coolest things, like when you actually see the calling work in action, is where you learn so much. So here in Canada, they do land by quarter sections. So we're watching this small bull at the back of a field, and Richard just calls him. It's not an area we can hunt, but he's like, just watch this so you can see how he responds to the calls. And a lot of people will call for a few minutes and like, no elk here. Let's move on to the next spot. So I watched him, and like as he's calling, he bugled once and then was silent for like 15 minutes. But in that 15 minutes, he is ripping up a tree, he's ripping up the ground, which we wouldn't have heard from that far
Yeah,
away. But being able to glass and watch what he did that for 15 minutes and then took his time working into us. So it was a solid 45 minutes that it took him to get to where we were, but we had his interest the whole time. And had I
huh.
not seen that, I wouldn't have learned to be so patient, in real hunting applications on places where I can hunt or had a
Yeah.
tag for. So that was really cool. It really taught me to like sit down and wait to see if the magic's going to work before we just rush off to the next spot for instant gratification.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard not to just keep moving forward. So,
Yeah.
well, that's awesome. What other stories do you have for us? Elk stories, whitetail, hog. You tell us.
I started off predator hunting, bear hunting. I used to be terrified of bears as a kid. Like I would literally swing on my swing set facing the woods so I could see if a
Yeah,
bear was going to come out and get me, even though we didn't have bears in the area. So I don't know if maybe that's why as I got older, I'm like, I want to shoot those things.
that's
But
funny.
my first bear hunt, I actually did a brown bear hunt out of Sitka, Alaska.
Oh
And
wow, that's
that's where
starting
my
off
predator
big.
hunting got started. Yeah, other than coyotes and stuff like that. Like I've
Yeah,
shot a bunch of coyotes with my bow in Illinois and whatnot. And I'm like, no, we're taking this to the next level here. So booked that hunt, and like it was so cool. We went with Alaska Raven Guides, and I think they're still in operation out there, but stayed on like an old tugboat converted into a houseboat, and we would cruise around to these different bays, and it was just absolutely beautiful. But I'm out there, and the other hunter, he's out there with his wife. This little old Frenchman who was a professor at Harvard. He's like traveled all over the world. He's got talking about like these stacks of bear rugs that he has at his house and these two leopards that he has on either end of
Oh
his
wow.
couch. Holy moly, I'm in some company here. But he passed up on so many bears that trip because he's like, I've shot so many, I want a perfect one. Meanwhile, I could not see a shooter boar to save my life.
That's how it goes.
Like, ugh, like, can we trade places here? So it's getting down to the wire on that hunt and, trying to be positive, but it's kind of hard. Like when you're on a 10-day hunt like that, you spend that kind of money because it has to be outfitted and whatnot. And you're out there really busting your butt to try to make it happen. And saw a lot of cool things, just no boars to shoot.
Yeah.
Um, but we got down to the last day of the hunt, which was the very last day of the season, and we finally see a boar. And so we pull up into this little bay, and my outfitter's like, look, there's an hour left of light. Like, this is probably your only chance you're going to get because first one we've seen the entire trip. Are you okay taking the shot? And like the joke the entire trip was, I wanted to shoot a bear that squared over 9 foot. And he's like, yeah, keep dreaming. If we get that, that'll be a miracle. But if we get over 8, we'll be happy. And so I think this one was like just under 8. And he's like, do you want to take it? I'm like, well, yeah, like I'd rather do that than eat
Yeah.
tag soup.
Yeah.
And
It's
we're out
still
in
a
the
big
middle of
bear.
nowhere, right? And so I'm getting set up to take the shot. Like we're creeping through the woods. I literally pull the rifle up to look through the scope, and I see him all of a sudden stand up on 2 legs and look out into the bay. And so I look to see what he's looking at. And out of the middle of nowhere, some random boat comes pulling in the bay, and he hits the ground and books her to the woods. I'm like, you've got to be freaking kidding
Oh
me. Like, 10
no.
days of hunting. We have an hour left of light. This is the only bear I've seen that I could shoot, and this happens. Like, what are the odds? And so I was like so discouraged getting back into the skiff. And I'm like, I literally sat there and said a prayer to myself, like, please let this happen. Like, I know the odds are very slim, but like, please let this happen. That wasn't the bear for me. Like, make something happen. And as soon as that like was in my mind, our outfitter Scott was like, bear, and he points across the bay, and I'm like, where are you even seeing, like, and he's this like older gentleman, right? So the fact that he even saw this thing like cruising along the banks of this other island was incredible. So we're just hauling butt to get over there. And so we pull up to the coastline of that bay, and we're trying to like be quiet, slinking through the trees and whatever, and all the while like light is diminishing, the clock is ticking. And so I look at him like, man, it's so noisy trying to go through these trees. Like, it's pretty dim at this point. We're almost out of legal light. We're just going to have to go straight at him. And he's like, you know what? We got nothing to lose. Let's do it. And I guess because it was so dark, like the boar didn't really care that we were walking closer. And sure enough, like I'm able to get lined up, take the shot, like light was waning. And thank God I had such a big gun. I was using a 375 on that trip. But I've never been so nervous to take a shot in my life because I knew if I messed that one up, that was it. We're literally like, the season was over. There were minutes left of light, and it all depended on like the perfect aim for that one shot. And so this is all running through my mind as I'm going to squeeze the trigger. And Scott's like, shoot, shoot, shoot. And I'm like, no, I need to be sure of my placement before I do this. And took my time, squeezed that trigger, and man, you could just see his body drop. And I was like, oh.
Oh, that's got to be relieving.
Yeah. And the wolves in that area were so bad, like I wasn't playing. So like after he dropped the first time, like I'm walking up, like trucking up pretty briskly, just jacking more shells and making sure like we're going to find him right there. Like he's not going into the bush because it gets so wet there. It's hard to blood trail. And then if you
Yeah.
don't recover them quickly, your beautiful bear could be demolished by wolves. And I was not having that happen on my bucket list dream hunt. And
Yeah, I
he
imagine.
squared 9'2".
Ah.
So yeah, like that that's like one of the highlights of my hunting career, and I think will be my entire life, because he was so beautiful, like had the perfect head, like had these gnarly scars. And then I got the paperwork back from Alaska Fish and Game, and he was well above average of any of the bears shot that year. Like he was just a big old brute of a boar, just stunning.
That's
So I
so
did a full body
cool.
mount on him and named him Manfred after the Frenchman that was on my hunting trip.
Yeah. How did that Frenchman compare him to any of his hunts?
The Frenchman no longer spoke to me on that hunting trip because that was the bear he wanted to shoot. He
Of
wanted a
course
shoot
he
that
did.
had 0 rubs on it, and Manfred, my bear, was perfect. His hide was absolutely stellar. So yeah, after I got my bear, Manfred passed up several boars himself, but yeah, he wasn't very happy with me. His wife talked to me, but he did
That's
not.
good. That's
So
good. Well, poor Mumford, or is it Mumford? Is
that's what
that
it
right?
is. Manfred. Close enough.
Manfred. Oh, there we go. That's funny.
Yeah.
Man, did you, I got asked, did you eat any of the brown bear? I know some people do, some people don't. I know those
I did
coastal
not
ones are a little
of the brown
funky.
bear. Yeah. And like that time of year, it was the spring, so they're coming down. So they're not really on the salmon yet, but still, I know a lot of people, and people throw shade because you have to eat what you kill, and we do for the most part. But a lot of the predators we don't. Like
Yeah.
cougar, I'm sorry, that's just not my preference. Some people, sure, me no. The bears, I just don't. Other people do, and we donate the
Yeah.
meat to people that do, but it's just not my taste. And we have
Yeah.
such a predator problem that I don't feel bad for shooting a
Yeah.
bear.
No, understandable, understandable. Yeah, and I don't know where I heard this from, but I heard from someone they in Alaska went on a brown bear hunt, and they were having the guide had this old smoker, and he's like, "Man, you got to
Mhm.
clean that smoker out. It just reeks of fish." And he's like, "I've never cooked a fish in
Yep.
that smoker. I've only
Yeah.
cooked brown bears and black
Oh, yeah.
bears." So they red. I don't know if it's even red meat, but that meat tasting like fish like that, I don't know if that's
Yeah.
appealing. And then there's the
It's
diseases and things that you can get, like is it
trichinosis. It's supposed to be
trichinosis? Yeah.
pork-like. Yeah. Same with cougar. It's supposed to be pork-like. Hi, Frank. But but yeah, no, bear's not my thing. But that
Yeah.
was an incredible hunt, and like his mount turned out absolutely fantastic. And it was a really hard hunt because that year was unseasonably warm for that area,
Hmm.
because usually there's still a lot of snow on the mountain peaks, and that year there weren't. So a lot of bears were up high, browsing and grazing instead of being down low on the coastal flats. But we made it happen
That's
somehow.
awesome, especially at the last second, right? You got
Oh
to.
yeah,
That's why you got to stay in the woods. Lots of hunters will leave midday or whatever. You just got to be
yeah,
there. If you're not there, you're
yeah.
not going to have the opportunity. And hunt long and hunt hard, and make sure you're there when the 9 foot bear shows up.
No doubt. That's what Richard says. He's like, especially
Yeah,
with elk hunting. Elk hunting is an all day thing. It's
yeah,
not a morning hunt. It's not an evening hunt, especially if you're hiking, 12 to 20K into the backcountry. You're not coming out midday for a
yeah.
snack.
Exactly, exactly. Speaking of Richard, he said a specific story that you have, and I was hoping that you could
Mm,
maybe share that one with us if you're taking
my
requests. Something
wolves.
about a wolf. Yeah,
Yes, wolves are my favorite wild animal. They're also my favorite animal to hunt because they are so smart, um, very cunning. You have to be very wise to outwit the pack of wolves. And same with the elk hunting. You have to really be able to read the sign around there to know what kind of a pack you're dealing with. And again, most of our hunts are spot and stalk. I know a lot of people like to run baits and sit on a bait all day or all week to hope one comes through, and they will eventually. And that's fine. That's just not how we like to. We like a really interactive hunt.
yeah,
But yeah, so we look for fresh sign and whatnot, and you can kind of tell if it's a lone wolf that you don't want to intimidate too much, or if it's a big pack that's dominant, you challenge the hell out of them, and they will come in running, trying to kick whoever's intruding's butt. So that's what we did. It wasn't last September, but the September before, and it was pretty incredible. We were out elk hunting and moose hunting. That's the cool thing about Alberta is you can go out in the morning thinking you're going to call elk, and maybe a moose comes out, maybe a bear comes out, or maybe a wolf will respond to your elk calls, as it did
Are
that day.
they, as a resident, is it hard to get the tags for all of those things, or every year can you pretty much
Oh
guarantee you'll
no,
have all of those?
super easy. Most places. It depends on what you're hunting and where. So bighorn sheep is $50 over the counter for an Alberta resident. Moose, unless you're in specific draw zones, over the counter tag. Whitetail over the counter. Muley over the counter. Again, unless it's specific zones.
Yeah.
Wolves, you can shoot as many as you want. Coyotes, as many as you want. So yeah, it's pretty cool that way. I do wish they would open up the whitetail tags a little bit better, because you basically get one general tag for all of Alberta, and Alberta is a pretty big place, so
Yeah.
the populations are different across
I
Alberta.
bet. I bet. So those tags that are actually kind of harder to get, are those tags due to a lack of population, and they're trying to kind of bring up the population, or is it because of monster animals in those areas,
So,
or both?
both, right? Lack of population. And that's the thing. Like, a lot of people talk about wanting 6-point zones or larger. Like, that's cool, I guess. But then you can get an 8-year-old monster 5.5 by 5 elk, right? Like, shouldn't that be eligible to be taken, is my opinion. But no, a lot of it's lack of population. And again,
Okay.
that comes down to the predator problem that we have. So we have coyotes, we have lynx, we have cougars, we have wolves, we have black bears, we have brown bears, or grizz here. Grizzlies are protected now. You're not allowed to hunt them, unfortunately, even though their numbers are abundant and they're very
Mm-hmm.
aggressive. We've had several personal encounters with grizzlies
Ugh.
charging us on our own property. And you're also not allowed to carry a sidearm here either. So that does make it pretty hairy in those situations.
Jeez, what is your, like, in case plan if a
Um,
grizzly's on your property? Charges.
You have bear spray, which I don't have a lot of. Some people swear by it. I
Yeah.
prefer to have a good strong pistol with me.
Yeah.
But we always have a rifle when we go out walking places, and we have a
Okay.
good shotgun too. So you
Gotcha.
have some sort of firepower no matter what, which is a pain, if you're packing a bow and a big rifle or shotgun too, and a giant pack, trying to elk kind of gets heavy and adds up quite a bit. So it's
Interesting.
cumbersome, but it's tough. It's scary in some places with how bad the grizz are.
Yeah. Well, I've asked too many questions. Let's go back. You were talking about
Oh,
wolves.
yes. So 2 falls ago, Richard and I were going up to our property up north to check trail cameras and see if this one herd of elk has been coming back through a property that we hunt. And it's all like open back country there. It's like straight bush. So lots and lots of land, no people around, just really beautiful, untouched area. And so we're cow calling, and all of a sudden a pack of wolves light up. And it was a big pack. And so, kind of knowing that, you kind of feel confident that it's going to be a dominant pack. And if that's the case, you can howl back to them, and that challenges them, right? Because they think another pack is in on their territory. Fall is also cool to hunt wolves because their pups from the spring are a little bit older. So they're training them for hunting, and the pups are also really reckless. So they'll come in and respond to any call. And then the more mature members of the pack are just kind of keeping up with them
Yeah.
to be there for backup. So
Interesting.
sure enough, like this pack lights up, and it's 12 wolves strong. And so Richard's howling, I'm howling, so we sound like a pack that's challenging them back. And then all of a sudden, like, we're sitting on a cut line behind a tree, and I've got my trusty 7mm with me, favorite gun, when we see them start working through the trees around us. And I'm talking like not even 10 yards away. So they don't realize we're people. They think we're wolves in the area, and we see them cutting across the cut line. So there's some in front of us, there's some to our side, there's others that are circling around behind us.
Oh,
When
jeez.
all of a sudden one pops out on the cut line, and I couldn't move. Like, the way I was behind the tree, I just couldn't move my gun to shoot that way because he would have seen. So I waited, and then all of a sudden another one popped out, and like on the swing, fired the shot and just smoked him. Like, you hear him going off, the rest of the wolves start howling. And it was just an incredible thing to see them that close, to work them over like that, and to keep challenging them and like getting them fired up. Like, you're battling back and forth with them, getting them all angsty. Um, but yeah, so shot that one wolf, and then they all scattered because they didn't know what happened. And so Richard and I were like, we think we can call them back in. So we kind of
No
changed
way.
locations a bit, started howling again, and I kid you not, had them coming back in. Like, we're standing in this grass, like these tall grasses that are over my head, and like Richard can see, and you can't see the wolves, you can hear them, you could smell them, and you
Ugh.
could see the grass parting like 10 feet in front of us. It was the most surreal experience in my life. I could live that over every day, like by far my favorite hunting experience ever. And like, if that could be every day of hunting, I would never hunt another animal in my life because it was
Oh
just
my goodness.
thrilling. And
That's
like for me, the grizzlies scare me still. Like I feel wary of them in the woods. Having the wolves that close, like I just loved it. Like I could, man,
yeah.
it was just the best feeling ever. Like there was no fear. Like if I could have gotten closer, I would have gotten closer.
That's like Jurassic Park stuff. I just the grass parting is
Yeah,
it
yeah,
like
right. When
sent
little raptors pop out.
chills down my spine. No thanks. I
Oh
just
man.
think, yeah, I'm thinking of dinosaurs jumping out at me. But so wolves are not like a threat to humans. I don't have any experience with wolves. Being in Colorado, we just started getting them back. They came
Yeah.
naturally, and then of course they
Yeah.
voted them in, so they're going to
Yeah.
be a lot
Yeah.
more. In fact, I read an article yesterday that's like 18 cattle were just slaughtered out near Meeker
Your
where they
elk
weren't even supposed to
numbers,
be wolves.
unfortunately, are going to take a dive, and it's sad.
Yeah,
Like Montana and
all the
whatnot,
ungulate
we
stuff.
went there a
Yeah,
lot. It's tough. The numbers down there between a couple bad winter kills and then the wolves coming in, it was pretty brutal the last couple times we went down there to hunt.
yeah.
It's going to
So,
be
but
sad to watch that happen to Colorado.
yeah, yeah, I'm not excited about it. But
And
if
I
they
love
come
them.
on
I
their
think there's a place for them, but
yeah, if
you
they
don't
come
need
on
to.
their own, I'm okay with it. It's the
Yeah,
politics of it all that I'm like,
yeah,
politics doesn't need to get its fingers into
no.
wildlife.
No, you have the
Um,
people like in the urban areas that are voting on something that they really don't have any education on. And
yep,
that's okay that they don't know about it, but they should understand it before they are consulted on it, right? Like if
yeah,
you have dogs or anything like that, if they hear a dog barking, we have to be super careful about bringing ours, to our
yeah.
property up north because if they hear them, it doesn't matter if you're standing right next to your German shepherd, they will come in and kill it. Like
Oh wow.
Richard's buddy runs dogs hunting cougars, and they literally had a pack of wolves come in and they were trying to beat the wolves off of their dogs with sticks because the wolves
Jeez,
did not care that they were there. Yeah,
that's so
they don't
crazy.
play around. Yeah.
But that actually brings me back to my question, which is like, are they not a big deal as far as humans? Like, should a human be concerned? Because I don't have any of that experience, and so like to me, that grass parting, I'm just like saying my prayers, just
I
texting my
think
wife, I love you. I don't know what I'm doing at that point.
it's
But am I overreacting, or is it like,
um so they're wary-ish of humans. Usually if they see a human, they're going to run. I think as
okay,
with anything, having a healthy fear or healthy respect to them is probably appropriate.
yeah,
For whatever reason with them, I don't. And that's probably foolish. Like with the bears, I do. The wolves, I don't, just because I'm in so awe of them. And I've actually studied them throughout all my university and everything else. Like I just love them that much. But yeah, healthy respect is good. Like Richard, I haven't experienced this, but Richard has in his younger days where he was walking out and a pack of wolves literally escorted him out of the woods and he just had his
oh,
bow and he's like yelling at them and they're kind of flanking him on either side as he's walking out at dusk. So that would be, a little concerning.
yeah,
um,
no thanks.
but they didn't try to, I don't know what they were doing. It's like they were letting them know that they were there and weren't afraid of them kind of thing. But that's not the typical. Typically, if they see a
Okay,
human, they're not interested and they're going to go.
gotcha. Okay, well, good to know. I feel a little
Mm.
bit better for
Grizzlies,
the
on the
next
other hand,
time.
on our property, there's a big boar that if he sees us and if you're within, his 300 to 400 yard zone, he's booking it at you. It doesn't matter
Ugh,
if you're in the tractor or on a quad or anything. Like if he sees you, he is charging you, which is a
gotcha.
bit scary.
And they're protected, but I assume you could defend yourself, right?
Um, you could defend yourself, but then you are going to pay tens of thousands defending yourself in court afterwards. Like it's
Jeez.
pretty messed up. Like there have been several people that have defended themselves and then they have had to pay to fight it out in court and prove that it was out of self-defense, which is outrageous. Like this is again, my background's in biology. Like I've done a lot of wildlife studies and everything else, and the head biologist here or former one love the grizz, so it became a very political animal. They became protected. But meanwhile, I think what did they say, Richard, at one point that there were 50 in all of the province of Alberta?
No way.
It was some stupid low number, and then it went up to a couple hundred. Meanwhile, this year we've had 7 different ones just on one trail camera on the front of our property up north. So
Wow.
that does, those numbers don't jive.
Yeah. We'll say it again. Politics and wildlife don't really mix. You need to get more
No.
biologists involved, but well, that's crazy. This is good. Hopefully I can get this out in October because your stories are freaking me out a little bit with wolves and bears because it's not something I have any experience with. So,
It's fun.
but
The
cool.
wolf
Well,
hunting honestly is like the coolest thing that you can ever experience in your life. Like
I
that's
bet.
it is a high like none other. Like it is pretty amazing. And the same with the elk. Like you could feel their howls through their body and like actually howling back at them and knowing that they're responding to you, like communicating in that way was pretty wild too. Like it's a cool
That's
thing to
awesome.
experience.
That's so awesome. Um, well, I hate segues are tough sometimes, but like, do you have any more stories for us? Like, do you have any other ones that stick out? I'm sure you have hundreds, but is there any that you want to tell us today?
You know, hmm, we did for our honeymoon. A stag hunt was always on Richard's bucket list. So I surprised him with a trip to New Zealand. And
Oh,
we
that's
had an
cool.
absolute blast there. Like you talked about hunting out of Jurassic Park. That's what it felt like in New Zealand. Like it was pretty incredible. I think our favorite hunt, we were actually on the North Island and the terrain was beautiful, like just lush rainforest type terrain. And all you could hear was the snorting of the fallow bucks and then the roar of the red stag all night long, all day long. It was incredible. It's like
Wow.
spot and stop dream. Yeah.
That is so cool. That's been on my bucket list for a long time, but I think you just moved it up a couple.
Oh yeah, if you're debating New Zealand, anybody out there, like start racking up the points on your credit cards so you can book your flights through that and get your
Yeah.
butt over there because it is to die for. We actually one of the guys that we hunted with, or we did 2 hunts there, and the first one was by far the best. And we've actually become really good friends with the guy that ran that. His name's TJ with Metanoia Ventures, but super cool outfit. Like he does your traditional estate hunts, which are very common over there because otherwise people just come in and mow everything down. But
Yeah.
he also has free range hunting too, which is really cool. So that was nice. In the way he does his operation, I will say, like with New Zealand, you have to be careful. It's all about what kind of hunting you want to do. Like some estate hunts you go to, and it's literally like shooting a beef cow. Like they just have the tag stag there. They don't have any females in the area because they just want straight, you know, bulls for people to come shoot.
Yeah.
Um, so you don't get like natural animal interaction, and that's not really Richard's and my thing. Where we hunted with
Understandably.
TJ, it was really cool because the animals still had fear of humans, right? Like they had their hinds in there with them, like their females in there. So you're getting your traditional like roar action and activity. They're fighting and sparring. And it was just a true hunting experience. So before anybody goes, I recommend you do your research and make sure it's going to be the kind of hunt that you want it to be so you don't get kind of a rude awakening when you get there. But
Yeah, that'd be pretty
it was
disappointing to
amazing.
show up and basically have a buck just chained to a tree that you have to put down.
I kid you not, like the second hunt that we did on our trip, that's why I don't even talk about it usually, was like that. And
Oh,
neither of us, we both looked at each other, we're like, we're not even interested in doing this because this is not our thing. Like the herd of all male stag were literally waiting by the gate. And of course your guide's like, oh, this is weird. They never do this. I'm like, whatever. Like they're waiting here. Like they know
yeah,
this is where the people are. They wouldn't let any hinds in there. Like if a hind or female fallow buck or stag got into their fenced off area, they would go in and shoot it because they didn't want to risk their trophy stag fighting and injuring each other. And that I don't like that. Like I want
yeah.
the animals that I'm chasing need to actually be wild. They need to have fear of humans. They need to have, natural behavior and activity. So that's why I really respect TJ and how he does it. Like they naturally breed even in his estate. It's big enough that they are truly wild animals and you get a truly authentic wild hunting experience.
Oh, I'm sure. I've spent a lot of time in Texas and been to a lot of those wild game ranches and things like that, and it seems to me often that it is sort of just like these animals just standing there, like just
Yeah.
they're no fear of humans. You drive by.
Yeah.
I drove by in a caravan of 50 cars one time through elk and
Yeah.
zebra and all these things, and they didn't care. And I was like, man,
It'd be
I
like
don't
going to
know.
Yellowstone Park and shooting, an elk that's used to seeing
Yeah,
people all day, every day with no threats, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
it
just
almost
it's
felt more
just
like
not,
pets. Yeah.
yeah, not my type of hunting. But our stag hunt with TJ, again, Metanoia Adventures, was amazing. Like Richard and I, we flew 13-hour flight overnight from LA to Auckland, landed and went straight out, like got
Oh,
our boots on the ground and got up there and just had a blast. It was like Jurassic Park walking through the woods there and like
I bet.
listening to them and seeing them and everything. Like Richard ended up getting a really stellar 400-inch red stag that was just absolutely beautiful. And then for me, we ventured over into the free range side, and I was actually able to make a pretty long range shot on a free range red stag. So I got a free range stag. That was pretty cool for me. So
That's awesome. With a rifle long range or with a bow long range?
archery, yeah,
That's
archery.
awesome.
Yep. And it was funny because like he was downhill, and this is where gun hunting, but especially with archery hunting, I highly recommend practicing in different terrains, different positions. My bow, like I'm drawing almost 60 pounds, but I make sure that I am able to draw sitting on my butt, propped up on my knees, leaning over, doing all the things. I practice shooting different angles, whether before my cougar hunt, shooting straight up if you're shooting at a tree or down. And this free range stag was very much down a steep hill. So I'm glad we put in that much time because I was able to make the shot. And it's funny, TJ and I were joking because we watched him run down that hill. And when he went out of sight, I looked at TJ. I was like, oh man, hopefully he didn't go into that ravine. And sure enough, when we got down there, he was head down, face down, wedged into this ravine. So that was a fun pack out, but it was pretty cool.
I bet. That's awesome. That's a cool story. Yeah, that's really high on my bucket list, and I think it just got a little bit higher. But still, I
Yeah.
think Canadian moose, a moose in general, whether I can get the Colorado tag,
Mhm.
which will probably take me 40 years,
Oh no.
um, or getting up there to Canada and hopefully getting a moose down someday soon. So
Richard and I have both. He last year got a stellar moose, a nice 50-inch moose on our property in northern Alberta. And that actually is pretty cool because we logged a bunch of land there. And it was the day after that we found out our third round of IVF, third embryo transfer worked out, and I was actually pregnant. So the next morning
oh
he's out there hiking and he's like, man, it caught me so off guard because all I kept thinking was, holy crap, we're pregnant. She's pregnant. And then all of a sudden pops up this moose.
yeah,
So he was scrambling a little bit, but made an awesome freehand shot and smoked him. But the
that's
kicker is
awesome.
right after he shot his moose, a bigger one walked out.
Oh,
We're
that's
saving that one
okay.
for you.
Yeah, right. Or his daughter, right?
For the wolves.
Yeah, or the wolves. That's awesome. That's so cool. That is so cool that he was walking through the woods just thinking, "Man, I'm about to be a dad," and then
Yeah, yeah.
a giant moose rolls in.
Yeah, so that was Olivia's first hunt recovery, I guess, officially.
Yeah, perfect.
And then my moose hunt, I had a really good one in northern Alberta. We were elk hunting, and that day we were pretty high up and had good elevation already, and we could hear a bull bugling at the bottom of this valley. And this is where, like, being overzealous, I was trying to convince Richard and our other friend there, like, let's go down after him. And Richard's like hell, can you imagine if we do by chance get him? Like, how are we getting him up that mountain and out of here? Like, that would take days. And so I wasn't able to convince him on that. And I was, giving him the stink eye a little bit. And so we moved to a different area, and all of a sudden we heard a moose grunting. And like hunting moose early in the season is really cool because they get their little rut holes established, and that's like their little home. And they will defend it against anything coming into that home, while they're there for the first 2 to 3 days until they move on and make a new rut hole and home looking for love. And so we hear this moose grunting and we see him through the trees, and you just see this massive rack glinting through the trees as we're glassing down again in another valley. And Richard looked at me and he's like, you want to try? And I looked at him like, is that a joke? And so like we're hoofing it to go down this mountainside. We get to the bottom. Before we can even get set up to call, that moose heard our steps and came busting through the trees, like charging in. And so we're scrambling to get set up against this spruce tree. And like Richard's calling, our friend Robbie is standing behind us holding his bow up in the air, kind of like a set of moose antlers. And that thing comes in and like he's got his antlers, and you know how they just wobble back and forth, like making
Yeah.
his noises. Oh man, like he wobbled back and forth into less than 30 yards. And I was able to make a perfect broadside shot, got complete pass through with my area. He went 30 yards and was done. It was such an incredible hunt. I think that was at 11 in the morning, shot him. And by the time we were able to get him recovered, it was almost midnight before we were back at camp. It was pretty crazy. So
Wow.
long day,
I
but
bet. Jeez.
really, really cool. And we still have moose meat. So
From 2 years
worth
ago
it.
or two
Yeah.
falls ago. That's amazing. That's
Yep.
amazing. What I'm not really sure of the seasons for the moose. I know you said it was early season. What was that, like August?
Yeah, so like end of August, beginning of September. So we usually do
Okay.
our elk hunt first, second week of September, and the moose in that time are really good too.
Okay.
So our property in northern Alberta, it's archery is open for general, but once it gets to what is it? I think October, then it switches to a draw in our zone, and that's where you
Okay.
have to have a special tag. And that's what Richard got his on last year, and I'm hoping to draw my tag there next year.
Gotcha. Good luck. I think so. I've never heard of. You said they're like their little zone that they get all defensive on. I've never heard of that, but now that I'm thinking about it, I've experienced that. So I was hunting in
Yep.
Colorado one time. I've dropped down in this ravine. Earlier in the day, we saw a herd of, oh, I don't know. I'm not kidding. 150 elk just going up and
Oh,
over this hill, dropping into the valley, and then we kind of lost sight of them. We're like, well, there's a little snow on the ground. I bet we can track those guys a little
yep.
ways and try and find out where they are. So we go that way. They end up getting shot at because it's Colorado and there's a million hunters out there.
Yep.
And so the tracks go all sorts of different directions. So I find a nice track, fall down into this deep ravine. I get down there and I'm like, man, I shouldn't have come down here. Like, good thing I have my sissy sticks with me because I am going to struggle to get out. And then all of a sudden I hear
Sissy
something.
sticks will save your butt.
Absolutely. It was the first time I've ever brought them with me, and I couldn't have gotten out of there without them. But I'm at the bottom, and I just hear something that's I didn't know what it was. It sounded like a car backfiring. I was like, "What
Oh.
the hell was that?" And I turn around, and there's two moose about
Mm.
75 yards just staring at me and just making noise, just been like, "Get out of here!" And I was like,
You're like,
"See you
fair
later."
enough.
I
Your
was like, "I do
place.
not have your tag, so I'm please
Yep.
just let me get up this hill."
Adios.
And
Can you tell me where the elk are?
yeah, right. So yeah, there was not a very successful season, but I will never forget just like what was that
Yeah.
noise, and
Yeah.
it was I
Yeah.
don't know if it's called a bark or whatever, but it sounded like a car backfiring. It was terrifying.
Yeah. It'll
So
get your blood going. Yeah, no, it's
yeah,
pretty cool. They make basically their version of a giant scrape, and the bulls will pee all in it and get their perfume and aroma going, and just get themselves all worked up and hot and bothered and looking for a lady.
yeah,
So yeah, if you can find those areas, we'd like to do that early in the season, but October is also fantastic for the moose here.
that's cool. That's super cool. Well, Brittany, this has been a lot of fun. Do you have any other stories for us? Otherwise, I know
I
you've got
do,
plenty
but
of
I
other
think we can
things
probably
going
do a
on.
part two. Yeah,
Okay, that
we'll
sounds
have to
good to
do
me. I
some of
don't
that.
mind, but we got to get your husband on here probably before we bring you back, or maybe we get you both on.
We can do that. We'll just make sure the baby's down and cooperating.
Perfect. Once she gets all those little teeth in. So, well, Brittany, thank you so much. I don't know if you have anything that you want to kind of tell the people about, the people that are listening, like where they can find you or anything like that. If you have any
Yeah.
ventures that you want to mention or any sponsors or whatever it might be. But I think this is a good time for that.
Yeah, so I am on Instagram. So Brittany Kichton, BrittanyKichton. I also have a hunting page on Facebook called Hunting with Brittany Kichton. So you can find me there. I also am on Drury Outdoors TV show called Critical Mass and post a lot of my adventures on their Deercast app, which if you are a whitetail hunter, it's actually pretty incredible. So they have some really awesome features on there, a lot of great content. And one thing that I've relied on heavily through my hunting season is their wind check feature, which is pretty spectacular. So you guys should give that a try. I don't get paid for promoting it. I just use it literally every day that I'm out there. So highly, highly recommended.
That's awesome. Well, Brittany, thank you so much for coming on the show. I will put all of that stuff in the show notes.
Okay.
So I know you gave a good amount of information. That way people could just go down there and click on it. But yeah, thank you. I really,
Yeah,
really appreciate it. And hopefully we get the ball rolling and we get some other good, amazing female hunters on the
or
podcast to tell us some
yeah,
other
and
fun
if you
stories.
want, I can reach out to a couple of my girlfriends that hunt in kind of pass your information along to them. We need more ladies to get on here and chat about it.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, thanks again, Brittany.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. All right, guys, that's it. Another bunch of stories in the books. I want to thank Brittany so much for taking her time to jump on the podcast. Obviously, at the beginning, her little newborn baby was given a couple tears, so we took a break, and of course, Mama was able to get baby back to sleep. So, Brittany, thank you for taking your time away from your family to chat with me and tell us all some of the amazing predator stories that you have up there from northern Alberta, Canada. So, that being said, guys, check her out. I've got all the links of everything we spoke about in the show notes. So please check Brittany out, follow her. Also, check out our Instagram, give us a follow. We got more listeners than Instagram followers, and that's a problem, folks. And then, of course, share the podcast. And go to your favorite podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it is, and follow us to make sure you're downloading the podcast weekly. And give us some reviews. That's it, guys. Again, thank you, Brittany, very much for joining on. All you listeners, thank you so much for tuning in every week, and I hope you guys are enjoying. Now, as always, go make some stories of your own.